I'm glad to see so many familiar and some new faces here. We're very excited about this new project. I'm just going to be kind of a segue between speakers. My name is Charlie Davis. Work in the USAID Office of Economic Growth on agricultural projects, and I'll actually be leaving soon, but being replaced by, is Kenneth Dunn here? Kenneth Dunn, who will be taking over for agriculture issues at USAID. And Anna Bogdanova, who's also in the back there, and we'll be screening questions online. Welcome to also anyone tuning in online. So we have first some opening remarks from our mission director, Jed Barton, and then a presentation from Matthew Krause, who is out here from DC with the Partnering for Innovation project, which is kind of assisting missions with these public-private partnership efforts. And then Ambassador Pai will be joining us later for some closing remarks. He's at the Agri-Export Forum right now giving some opening remarks there. So, okay, with that, I guess I'll hand it over to Jed. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Charlie. I appreciate all of you agreeing to participate in this event here today, developing effective agricultural partnerships for sustainable development and agricultural growth in Ukraine is very important to us and our priorities, and we look forward to engaging with many of you in the process. Ukraine faces incredible challenges, and they're not limited to one particular one, but they're varied. But I do believe that there's a great deal to be optimistic about it as well. We recognize in Ukraine a desire to make changes, to have a more democratic, reform-oriented, open, transparent system of government and economy. It will certainly not be easy, and that's a big part of why we're here today. But one of Ukraine's greatest challenges happens to be the area that is also perhaps its greatest asset and area with the greatest potential, and that is the agricultural sector. Last June in Odessa, the USAID administrator, Raj Shah, talked with some of you about a new model of development, a model that recognizes public-private partnerships as the foundation of more effective and strategic approach to developing the economy. This approach focuses on global and local entrepreneurs as critical players in achieving sustainable economic growth. Most importantly, public-private partnerships that we're looking to build, and the resulting investments must be transparent and responsible, so that the benefits are felt by everyone. I'm not looking to continue the practices of benefiting a few, but ensuring that what we do benefits the entirety of society. There are plenty of examples that prove that public-private partnerships indeed do work. From the Philippines to Tanzania, we're seeing the power of this very model attract responsible investment and promote growth. Today we need to think about how we can transform our institutions in advance of this model. The key to making this work is going to be innovation. We need to look beyond the way we've done things in the past, or the predictable and ways, things we're comfortable with. We need to be bold and look towards new ways of using the assets that Ukraine has in ways that haven't been utilized in the past. And if we can do that together, we can make a difference. USAID's new Agriculture Partnership Initiative will help develop new ways to build Ukraine's agricultural sector. Through partnership, we can draw on new ideas and support game-changing innovations and make our resources go further by investing in market-based projects. If I've learned anything in the last 25 years that I've been involved in development, is that development agencies, donors, are more effective when they work with the private sector, when they use the resources we have to leverage other resources so that everyone can be more effective. I look forward to seeing the ideas that you have, transforming them into partnerships that will nurture economic growth within this country and allow agriculture to really to fulfill its full potential and return Ukraine to being the breadbasket of all of Europe. Thank you.
So I guess, Matt, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, it's nice to see many of you. I was here a few weeks back and had some great meetings with a number of you. And for the new folks, I'm looking forward to meeting you and talking with you going forward. My name is Matthew Krause. I'm the Partnership Development Lead for the Partnering for Innovation program. Partnering for Innovation program is a 5-year program funded by USAID out of Washington, D.C. So we're essentially funded program. Today I'll talk a little bit about Partnering for Innovation as well as specifics on what the USAID mission is hoping to do and accomplish through its partnerships here in Ukraine. I'll also hopefully address most of your questions regarding the solicitation, the opportunity that we'll discuss today. And finally, we'll end with a question and answer session as well. So thank you. So first off, Partnering for Innovation really has 3 main components or activities that we focus on. And first and foremost, we work with USAID missions around the world to help support them in developing a strategy and ultimately forming partnerships with the private sector. And this is important, as Jed mentioned, because this brings forth new technologies, innovations, new ways of doing business, new ways of getting product to the market. And also assures the sustainability after the project ends. Secondly, we also have a pool of funds where we run commercialization grant solicitations, and specifically we're targeting introduction of off-the-shelf or existing technologies into new markets. And finally, we also have a platform, a ag tech exchange, as we call it, a platform for communicating out and disseminating some of the best practices and the lessons we've learned. Today we're really going to focus on the first bullet point, which is our work that we're doing here with the USAID mission here in Ukraine. Just to give you an idea of where we work, the program works really all over the world, heavily focused in Africa and Latin America. I noticed the slide's pretty small, so most people won't be able to read the details. We will post this presentation up on our website for you to look at closer. But in general, these are a various number of projects that we're supporting towards commercializing different technologies and private sector partnerships. So, how do we work with USAID, and specifically how do we work with USAID here in Ukraine? First of all, the USAID mission here in Ukraine or anywhere in the world makes a request to our program to ask for its support and assistance. And in doing so, they're also committing to funding, what we call in the business a buy-in. They're looking to put forward funds that they have towards partnerships that they'd like to develop. So the first bullet point is addressing sort of the funding and the commitment from USAID mission. My team, Partnering for Innovation, comes out and works to meet with a various number of private partners, associations, development organizations to get an idea of what the scope, what the targeting might be for these partnerships. And we work closely with USAID along the way to design ultimately a solicitation, which was released February 2nd, and you can get a copy up here in front. It's also online, a solicitation that's targeted at those goals and objectives that we have collaboratively brought forward. We also then, my team will also conduct due diligence and work on evaluating those applications. Again, we have participation with USAID mission on shortlisting the applications, and ultimately the goal is to take those shortlisted opportunities and bring them to an award or an agreement between the parties. We also will ultimately help in managing those partnerships along the way, managing the partnerships for an expected 2 years. So in the Ukraine, late last year, we started a dialogue. Charlie was involved in communicating with our team. We then made a decision to come out in January, where I met many of you. We spent a couple weeks out here getting kind of a quick snapshot and meeting with a number of you out in the audience. We then worked for a few weeks on designing the solicitation. February 2nd, we released the solicitation. It's now live for a 45-day period. And then we're here today during the Bidders Conference to hopefully address some of your questions and then get the word out that this opportunity is there. And I'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about things coming up in the near future. So looking at USAID's broad objectives and why they're doing this, the first thing, and as Jed mentioned, is really to look at a partnership with the private sector, commercial entity. We want to work with companies that are working here in Ukraine, work with them in building their business, but also developing objectives and goal and impact towards the beneficiaries that we're focused on. With working with private sector, you're really ensuring the long-term sustainability or the commercial viability of these projects. The projects may only last for a few years, but hopefully what we're starting will last for much longer. The other thing to note is that we want to focus on business goals that you all have as businesses. We want to feed into growing your businesses, but at the same time we want to measure and focus this financial opportunity at impacts or development goals, as we would say from the USAID side. Development goals such as job creation, increasing productivity at the farm level, increasing incomes, and obviously revenues as well for the businesses. The real focus of this support is going to be targeted at that small and medium-sized enterprise, and I'll talk a little bit later about what that means or how we define that. The funding level at this point for this window is $3 million US. That is the amount of money that USAID is putting forth into the partnerships. We anticipate that would be spread over 3 projects. But that said, we will look at what we receive. It's possible that if we receive an application that is excellent and superior to all the rest, we could fund less than the 3, and it's possible we could fund more than the 3 if we have the financial ability to do that. I do want to note that we do have some restrictions on what we can fund, specifically from the USAID side. We can do some small-scale infrastructure projects, but it becomes difficult when we start doing large-scale, multi-million-dollar sort of installation and structures. There's environmental challenges that we face within the USAID rules and regulations. And also, we're not able to fund vehicles specifically. We were able to do that, but as a challenge when we support vehicle purchases. Just wanted to make a few notes. But other than that, it's pretty broad on what the funding can be used for, and we can talk later about specifics on that. And then finally, the key bullet point is this is a leveraged program that we aim to leverage private sector funding to be matched up with the USAID funding. We need to see at least a 1-to-1 match to be even considered for review, and obviously those that are higher than that will be more competitive. So I encourage you all to consider that when developing your applications. So with those USAID objectives in mind, we have designed this solicitation for new agricultural partnerships. And I do want to highlight a few aspects of this solicitation this morning. First of all, who's eligible to apply? Specifically, we're looking for Ukrainian registered private sector partners, and let me define that. It is also laid out in the SNAP or in this solicitation, but that includes domestic and international private sector, commercial companies. It includes cooperatives, farming cooperatives, as well as local and international non-profit NGOs. Now, in the case of non-profit NGOs that do apply, they need to demonstrate that they have a partnership with a private sector commercial business and that they're bringing forth with that partnership the 1-to-1 investment match that we mentioned earlier. Secondly, our projects must incorporate a real focus on the SME, the small and medium-sized enterprise. We define a small and medium-sized enterprise as one that has less than $1 million in annual revenue, or if it's focused at the farm level, your activities, farms that are less than 3,000 hectares of cultivation. This might include a focus on input suppliers, smaller input suppliers, equipment, distributors, farm producers, of course, market operators, as well as service providers. So please note that there's obviously a difference between the bidders, who's eligible to apply, versus what the projects themselves should really focus on in programming. As I mentioned earlier, there's the minimum of 1-to-1 match that's required through this partnership. That match can be both cash investment from that partner, or partners in plural, as well as in-kind match. And I'll refer you again to the solicitation document that you all should have, and if not, it's here on the table. It does specify on pages 2 and 3 kind of how we differentiate cash investment versus in-kind. But do note there is a preference towards the cash investment over the in-kind. So again, I encourage you to look and consider that. And finally, the partnerships, we're looking to fund partnerships for a 2-year period, that period ending in July of 2017. Thus, over the next few months, we'll be negotiating with those shortlisted partners and hopefully awarding sometime in June. Okay, so looking at sort of the evaluation criteria, how we're going to score these applications that we receive, how we look at them, and what's important to us, there are really 5 key evaluation criteria, and they are in order of importance. So the ones earlier bullet pointed here are weighted heavier than ones later. First of all, clearly we have to see that the partnership you're proposing has a private sector commercial partner, one that's bringing forth their expertise to really drive both business as well as development impact. Second, we want again to see that this partnership, these activities are really targeted at that small and medium enterprise level. And we want you to tell us what activities, what interventions you're going to move forward that will drive impact on that SME, and tell us what the impacts will be for those SMEs as you focus your activities at them. This might be improving access to inputs, agricultural inputs. Obviously, it could also be expanding new market opportunities, better technology, technical advisory services, or in general, just improving their business practices. So the activities can be focused in a number of ways, but we do ask that you really show us what ultimately the activities are, as well as the impacts on that small and medium-sized enterprise. Thirdly, we will look at the partnership and the organizational capacity of the different companies or organizations applying. We encourage partnerships or consortiums. There will need to be a lead organization, and then there are partners within that team, especially if it fills technical gaps, or at least make sure that you explain why these partners are being brought on. Make sure that it's clear to us what is that technical gap or special need that they fill that can't be filled by perhaps the other partners. And again, I'll note, if NGOs, nonprofit NGOs, either local or international, are applying, they need to, in this case, make sure they tell us about the private sector partner that they're bringing forth. Fourth, sustainability. This section, we really want to see what is the commercial viability of this project after the grant ends. So the key here is to talk about the future. Yes, you're going to do X, Y, Z over a 2-year period, but how will that impact and continue to impact 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? So we do encourage you to focus and tell us on how these partnerships will continue and what those impacts will be moving out into the future. And finally, the leverage ratio. This is the funding that comes in from the partnership that you're proposing. We want, again, to stress, we want this to focus on new investments. We don't want you to simply provide us an application that's sort of funding your existing or ongoing operations. So try to focus these applications and ultimately these projects at new opportunities that you're looking to support, expansion opportunities or new investments that you're hoping to make in your businesses. So the requirements, what's needed and when is it needed? There are really four key things that are needed to be sent in to us. The first is a background form. The background form can be found at the back side of the solicitation. It's a 1-page, and there's kind of a fill in the blank. There's a number of more broader questions there, and we'd ask that you fill out that form. That's the first piece. Second is to answer the question and answers in the technical application, and this should be, I think there are 4, 6, 7 questions. So answer those 7 questions, and we do ask you to keep it to 12 pages maximum as far as your description and answers to those questions. Third is a budget showing not only how much you're requesting from USAID and how you're planning to use their funds, but also explaining your leverage with the private sector investment and how those funds will be used, as well as a notes or cost notes to explain how you came to develop that budget, the specific line items. And again, there are templates that are provided both for the budget as well as some cost note instructions that are on the website that most of you have been to already. So please do use those templates. It is important for us so we can compare and contrast all of the applications that we have a similar structure to the budgets. We also encourage you, it's not required, but we encourage you to provide an organizational chart to sort of show staffing and perhaps partnerships, how they kind of work together. It helps us visually see what you're trying to communicate. And also MOUs or partnership arrangements you might have, especially if you are proposing a number of partners. That can help us to better understand what are those relationships you have and what are the responsibilities for the partners. So those are optional. But again, the key ones are the background form, the technical questions answered to a 12-page limit, the budget, and the cost notes. So 4 pieces. Those need to be all submitted through an email. The email is innovation@fintrack.com. They need to be submitted before 6 p.m. or 1800 Eastern Standard Time, March 18th. So we are very particular about the timeline, so please make sure you get that in. Should be no problem because that would be early in the morning here, so hopefully you'll have submitted it probably to us by early afternoon our time anyway. But we do encourage you to make sure you keep that deadline in mind and that you do submit a full application with all 4 pieces to the email that's mentioned here. I would ask that you plan to start your projects around the June 2015 timeframe, and then of course end July 2017. So approximately 2-year proposal and a 2-year budget that you're providing to us. Okay, evaluation. Just to give you an idea of how we evaluate who and when and how that's done. We will have a 4-person evaluation team. It consists of folks that are both part of the Partnering for Innovation as well as the USAID mission. Over a 3 to 4 day, 5 day, it depends how many applications we receive. We will discuss those openly amongst that team, and we will ultimately score them based on the 5 criteria that I mentioned earlier. There will eventually be a ranking of those applications, and there'll be a short list of the ones that we would like to support and fund. This will occur in early April. That's the anticipation, and we'll show in a little bit of the timeline on that, but the anticipation is early April to have that internal evaluation. We will then look at the budgets, and we will then determine of the shortlisted applications that we'd like to fund, how much money do we have and to support those based on the $3 million budget level. So we'll have to then look at how many of them we can fund, and that's why I mentioned earlier that the anticipation is 3, but it would depend on ultimately the competitiveness of the applications and which ones we can fund with that financial limit. And immediately after the conclusion of that technical evaluation committee, we start negotiations. So please be ready with your key people to visit and meet with us. We will immediately begin discussing and negotiating. And what to expect during those negotiations. During the negotiation period, we do work closely with you on defining what are those activities or interventions that you're proposing. And and there is usually some back and forth and fine-tuning from what you've originally submitted. We also will focus on developing milestones, goals or objectives for you to reach along the way, and I'll talk a little bit more about the milestones in a moment. We verify the costs. We make sure that what you're proposing for office space or salaries is in line and is competitive with the market here. We do site visits, and that can be to anywhere in the country if there are farms that you're proposing to target or operations in other areas outside of Kiev. So it'd be site visits. And then there's reference checks as well, and that references are asked for in the background form. We'll follow up with them. The process of negotiation takes quite a bit of time. It's usually 2 to 3 months. There's a lot of back and forth between my team and the lead partner on the application. And again, that'll start early April, and I'm expecting it to conclude in the June timeframe. It could be faster or slower. A lot of it depends on the organization's responsiveness to different pieces of information that we need along the way. So I just wanted to kind of highlight here near the end why it's USAID and why all of you, what's the difference between working with this Partnering for Innovation program. The first thing is it really is an accelerated solicitation and award process. Any of the development organizations in here will understand that. We pretty much started our discussions with the mission, as I said, late last year, and we'll have awards by June. So approximately a 6-month period from start to finish to award at least. We, Partnering for Innovation team, will directly manage these partnerships and provide backstop support. That said, USAID will also assign an activity manager that's obviously based here in the mission, and the activity manager will be clearly an eyes and ears on the ground, and will also work closely together with managing and course correcting if there are any challenges with these projects. I talked a little bit earlier about milestones. So the agreements that eventually will be signed are based on milestones being achieved along the way or over the 2-year project life. Generally, there's 10 to 15, maybe more, probably more than 20 milestones that will be negotiated between the partners and ourselves. These milestones will include sort of key activity goals or business performance metrics that have to be met. They will have specific cost verification language. How do we determine that you've actually met that goal? It will have a due date. When is that goal due? And it will have a payment that is paid upon completion of that goal. So you're paid ultimately as you hit these milestones along the way. And to show you, this is just a sampling of one of our agreements. In this case, it's actually Mozambique. This is just the first 3 milestones. You'll see this eventually in the agreement. In this case, this partner's award was made in, I think it was late November. So the first thing you're going to note is within a couple weeks, there is a milestone, the first milestone, which is an approved first-year work plan. And that generates a pretty hefty payment. In this case, it was $426,000. So many folks will say, well, what? We don't understand. We're not getting money up front. How do we actually start these operations? Well, I can assure you that within the first couple weeks, the first milestone will be a first-year work plan, and there will be a significant amount of money to get things started with this project. There will also be milestones earlier on, and then such as in this case, there's a training plan, and then there's focusing on farmers doing seed multiplication, and the payments are ultimately, they're unusual numbers in this case, but that's because they're based on a percentage of the total amount of the budget that's finalized. So they are not always consistently 10% for each milestone. Some milestones are weighted heavier than others. And I will note that there are milestones, of course, right at the end as well. So you have to see this thing through and complete it to get some of the to get the funds, the full amount of the funds from USAID. There will also be requirements along the way for you to demonstrate that you have also submitted or put in your leverage value. So that will also be required in some of the milestones. So, next steps. Well, we're here today, February 12th, I think it's February 12th, at the Bidders Conference. February 19th, 7 days from now, all of the questions that you have need to be submitted to us. So if you have further questions after today, that's fine. If you think of something in the next few days, that's great. Submit that through our website, through the email address. And we ultimately will capture all of your questions and we will post them for everyone to see. So perhaps later on you may say, oh, I wish I had asked a certain question. It's good for you to look at the list of questions asked because probably someone asked a very similar question that you're looking for an answer for. The applications are due March 18th, so a little over a month from now. The technical committee, I mentioned the 4-person technical committee, will start reviewing the applications in the early April time frame. And immediately negotiations will begin, and as I mentioned, it takes usually a few months, so early April to June, and then the awards and the implementation, or the real work, begins then in June. This is our website. Many of you that have looked at the application will have been directed here. There's other funding opportunities on this website, and there's other companies that we're already working for have different technologies, and so this could be an interesting place for you to share both your technologies as well as meet with other potential partners and look at different innovations around the agricultural sector. And with that, I'll conclude. I don't know if we want to start question and answer immediately, or Charlie, I guess I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think probably without further ado, we'll start with any questions that anyone has. I know some people had some prepared. If there's anybody chiming in online with questions, we can answer those as well. And all of this will also be recorded and then put online, responses to any questions. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Question regarding a 12-page application. So should we strictly be in line with these questions and bullet points, or if we feel that there is some important information that is out of scope of these questions, we can add it as well?
I think maybe you want to,
Okay.
yeah. I think a lot of these will be application related. So.
Yeah. So I guess at a minimum, make sure that you are responsive to any specific questions, comments that are made within those questions that are provided. But yes, I encourage you within the 12-page limit to give us as much detail of what you're planning to do and how you're going to do it, as well as what those impacts, how you're going to measure that. So yes. I encourage you.
The structure can be a little bit modified as long as this questions answered.
We do ask that you do fill in responses based on the questions because, again, that'll keep it consistent amongst all of the applications. So do keep the headers in for the questions and respond to them. But within your responses, you can vary or add additional comments.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Yeah, I have a question. Our existing partnership between our non-profit NGO and corporation focused on small business in form of smallholder farmers. And I hope that Agribusiness Partnership is also aligned with this, and we can scale up our impact, increase the number of smallholders who are united into cooperatives, and it can be counted and considered as a small business under your definition.
Yes. As I mentioned, small and medium-sized enterprises do include farmers, farmer producers. In the context of Ukraine, smallholder is defined as 3,000 hectares or less, which is much larger than in other contexts around the world. But yes, the smallholder, as you're saying, the farm level support is encouraged.
Okay, another question is based on USAID experience or your public-private partnership experiences in other countries. What is your suggested acceptable rate, minimum, maximum of indirect or overhead cost in the total amount of the project for effective project implementation?
Yeah, we don't have a minimum or maximum, and we will fund those indirect rates based on sort of your official stated and what has been previously negotiated. In the case if there has been a previous amount that you've used, we'll use that. But during our review of the budgets, we'll have more discussions about that. But there's not, to answer your question, there's not a set minimum or maximum. And again, we don't look at the budgets till we've already done the technical review. So we're not looking at a budget and saying, oh, this rate's too high, this rate's too low, and factoring that into the technical evaluation. The technical is based basically on those 12 pages plus the few other documents you're providing. Once there's a short list, we then do open up the budgets and start to look at the numbers and the overall value you're asking for. Thank you. Please.
I've got a question. Mr. Krause, where did this limit of 3,000 hectares of land appeared from? I mean, here, if you compare with agri holdings, the 5,000 hectares enterprise can also be considered as the medium size, but with that limitation, you leave them out of scope of the project. So maybe, is that critical criteria, this limit of 3,000 hectares land under cultivation?
Okay. I don't know if, Charlie, you want to mention why the 3,000 specific number. The second part to that question is yes, it is something that was previously discussed, and it was decided that that is the level that we're going to look at or less. So as far as specific requirements, if you're focused on one that's above that, it would not count. But 3,000, do you want to comment on that number specifically?
Yeah, I think to some extent we had to pick a number, and depending on who you talk to, 3,000, 5,000, some might consider even larger than 5,000 to be a medium-sized farm in Ukraine. But just given the donor environment here and what other donors are doing, and the amount of funding that this, we understand this is a very small amount of funding as well, related to the entire agricultural sector. So the idea was to target that somewhat small, still medium, I would say, but somewhat smaller medium-sized farm. So, but for the application process, it would have to be less than 3,000 hectares. So.
Please.
Hi, I'm Sean with Gus Consulting, Ukraine. And one of the things that we did, I just want to be clear to go over it since we're here. We partnered with a large-scale NGO for all of Ukraine in the agricultural sector. And then what we're doing is reaching out to SMEs and then partnering with as many SMEs as we can, somewhere between around 10 as our target. So we're actually having 10 small, medium-sized enterprises. And then in addition, our clarification was between 3,000 and 5,000 was actually the medium size in Ukraine. So what we did was we went and took another approach of, okay, well, we can partner with those in a different way. So we actually just set up a program that way. But really what the USAID program is looking for is not SMEs applying directly, but either NGO partner with a private business is in essence becoming the hub, and the SMEs are becoming the sort of the spokes of the wheel to radiate out the leverage partnership, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, and then at the same time too, What we did then is set up even our own seminar to whereby we could sift through and look for the most qualified applicants. So I just wanted to verify that is exactly how we're looking, and the end goal is to have the most financial leverage to as many spokes of the wheel as possible, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
That's
just wanted to
correct.
make sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Online, questions online as well, but we'll move forward if not.
I have
Yes, please.
a question talking about the consortium.
Yep.
As I understood, the eligible applicant is Ukrainian registered company or
Yep.
NGO. But international organizations, are they eligible to be a partner within this consortium?
Multinational companies are eligible to apply, assuming they are registered to operate in Ukraine. So, the first thing to be clear is they can apply. They just need to demonstrate that they have registration status within Ukraine to operate. Yes, also, they could be a partner to another domestic or local company or local organization as well. So either or.
I would like to clarify the question with the who should apply. I mean, you said the project should benefit SME, right? But we are a bigger company, we're a food processor, we are working with the farmers.
Yep.
Most of them are SME according to your definition. And we do have plenty of ideas how we could develop some new projects, innovative, with some new processed food, which of course entail a new growing for the farmers.
Right.
And is it okay if we apply in partnership with our existing partners for the new programs that would benefit them, of course, and us as a food processor? Is it okay?
Yeah, that sounds exactly the type of partnership we're talking about. A larger company that is hoping to either move into new small and medium-sized enterprises to support them, or existing and they're bringing in new technologies or expanding operations, so bringing in new. So yes, you would be eligible to apply, and the key is that you focus your activities and ultimately your impact on that small and medium-sized enterprise.
You mentioned about that the program will be looking into the new investments, not the current operations of the companies. Can you provide an example or clarify that statement in detail?
Yeah, so you could, first of all, you can imagine that we are not wanting to just fund ongoing operations as you're already doing in the country. I mean, the bigger picture for this opportunity is to push folks towards new investments, to make those investments now as opposed to later, and to drive those investments at that SME level. It will depend. There's so many. It depends on the company that's applying, but obviously, if you are an ag input or equipment supplier, it might mean focusing, building capacities and of your distribution network, which is going to expand you into new areas to provide your products and services to those equipment or products to those SMEs. So it could be in this case where you're the expansion into a new geographic area, or it could be maybe now you're focused mostly on the medium size. And so with this opportunity, you will now be focused and targeted more down at that smaller enterprise level. If you're a food processor, it could be investments in a new product line or an expanding into a new market with your products is going to require you to buy more commodity. And that commodity that you plan to buy from will be focused at that small and medium producer level, in this case a farm level, or an aggregator, building their capacity to procure more. So it can vary greatly depending on the scenario, but the key is to just keep in mind that we talk about new investment. We don't want to see that it's just business as usual. And these are funding that you would put in anyway. You have to demonstrate and explain to us that this is pushing you in a new direction, and hopefully in a direction towards that SME, focusing more on the SME or new area that maybe you haven't focused on with the SMEs. Please.
Questions regarding being a producer. You talked about ag machinery, ag processor. How about as far as actually from the producers themselves? If we came in and actually paired with the producers, say trees, vines, row crop, and you give it 2 years basically for the evaluation of the project along the milestones. Basically 2 years you'd be out. In reality, trees are a 25-year investment. They're gonna make much more money over time. You can start getting production. Would you evaluate something like that as a long-term advantage? Because basically you're talking about a long-term investment.
Yeah, right.
25 years or more.
Yeah. That's a challenge for you all to, when you communicate to us, to demonstrate that the impacts are longer term and more beneficial down the road as opposed to within a 2-year period. So we'll take that into account as long as you're communicating that properly to us, and we'll measure that impact not only within the 2 years but out into the future. I think there's a requirement perhaps to even provide us some forecasting, a 5-year sort of plan, projection of how this will, how you'll impact down the road. So if you provide that, that'll give us some clarity. Yeah, thank you.
If there are a few companies willing to participate in the project, should each of them submit the background form, or there should be one leading company, and this organizational chart should be described in other documents?
I think the question is should whether one with a number of partners or each individually. Is that?
No, we have a few companies which want to implement the project. Should each of them submit the background form, or there is only one company submitting background form and describing this organizational structure
Right.
in other documents?
So any one company can submit more than one application. So if you have a number of business units and they each are focused on perhaps a different value chain or a different geographic area or a different aspect, yes, you can each, and I encourage each of those partners or each of those departments can, on their own, apply. You also could, although the funding is fairly limited, you also could combine all of those into one application as well. So it's really up to you to decide what is most competitive for what you're trying to achieve.
No, but should we submit background form for each company, or there is only one company?
You can do either way. It's up to you to decide. I mean, I can't tell you which way to do it. Internally, you have to look at if you believe it's better for each of your individual groups to submit, that's fine. Or you could submit as one. There's not an advantage one way or the other. There's not a requirement one way or the other. It's an internal decision for you all to make either way.
No, he means the partners. All 3 partners have to submit the background
If there is a
form.
consortium.
Okay, within the, okay. So if it's a consortium of partners, then, sorry, I did misunderstood. If it's a consortium of partners, only the lead organization needs to submit the background, the technical, and the other documentation. Yes, sorry. Yes. Please.
Another small question. In our envisioned project, the major spending should be with the new agri-cycle, which means December, when you start thinking of the inputs for the new harvest. Is it okay if we apply and win, and the money you say should be spent June? Is it okay if the money waits until December?
Yeah. Well, the payouts and the milestones will be based over a 2-year period. So in the scenario you're mentioning where you're focused on the ag input and that occurs in the December timeframe, then yes, there will be some initial milestones for staffing up, training, preparing your staff and your partners, and then there will be milestones for as you deliver those products. If you're a company that's looking perhaps at bringing product from the market, you're a processor, then you may be earlier in the process in June already looking at increasing your volume. So it depends on your business and where you fall in the cycle of the agriculture. But we would work with you one-on-one after you're shortlisted to look at what are the most logical milestones that fit your business model. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, you brought up a question about agribusiness growing trees. And this is actually, we've had probably 3 or 4 SMEs talk to us about not only growing the trees, but also processing the trees. And we had our law firm actually look up and define agribusiness in Ukraine. It's very right on the edge of some of the qualifications trees in agribusiness qualify and some of it doesn't. And is there any definition of how growing and harvesting trees is going to fit in agribusiness or not fit in agribusiness? Because we definitely have 3 or 4 that have asked us about that, and also processors.
Feed the future.
Yeah, I would say trees for fruit, nuts. So yeah, I think we're going to align with food. Food tree, but trees are included, but ones that produce food. If that, as a broader, but you know, I'm not. If I don't answer your questions correctly, also feel free to ask them again in written form to the email address, and you know, that allows us to get our smaller team together to make sure that we answer exactly what your question is. But as far as that's concerned, yes, we would consider it as long as it's food.
Yeah, well, feed the future.
Yeah,
We thought that was the end goal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, when we prepare budgets, we saw that there are 3 types of leveraged funds, which include cash, in-kind, and other donor sources. But looking through budget examples, we saw only one column, which is cumulative of all these 3 types. So how are we going to split this to be captured? These important types of leverage funds. How you're going to track?
Well,
to have descending order of priority.
Yeah. So first of all, in your cost notes, you're going to explain to us every line item how you're coming up with that figure. And in the case of, for example, you're going to allocate some of your senior manager's time to a project, you would explain to us that this is an existing person on your team and they're allocating a certain percentage of their time. In that case, it's more of an in-kind contribution to the project. It's someone that already exists on staff and will be paid anyway, but they're focused on the project. In the other scenario, you are hiring brand new staff. You're going to hire extension staff or additional team for processing on a production line or something like that. In that case, it's a new investment, a new employee. So we will not differentiate in the budget. It's only one column for leverage. But the value is still associated. And in the budget notes is where you'll explain to us this is an existing piece of equipment, as an existing person or existing effort, and therefore it's an in-kind versus a new investment and a new expense.
Yeah, and one more related to this leverage funds, and also related to other questions related to consortium of applicant and other partners. Like currently, our non-profit fund has a partnership with corporation, and all our projects are co-designed, co-funded, and co-managed. But when we implement this project, our non-profit is implementing partner, and with all funds, with co-funding going through our company, right? Can we keep this existing model for future initiative and have only one applicant, but showing in the organizational structure of this project other for-profit company, which is important and can play also lead role in this partnership, but not as implement.
Yes, right. That's fine. Yeah, you could have one organization that's the lead. In fact, there needs to be one organization that is the lead applicant, and then in that scenario, you would have a number of partners. Those partners can receive funding through the project, and obviously those partners will bring leverage to the project. So you would show that in your budget, how much of your funding is going towards, in this case, the management or the implementation, and how much is going down to the partnerships. So in the budget, I think there's a number of tabs where you can also put sub-partners' budgets in there as well and show leverage and also how they're going to use USAID funding.
So in this case can be only one column of leverage funds, but to confirm co-funding from private for-profit company, we can demonstrate our contribution or cooperation agreement, and that's enough. It's not necessary to have subcontracts formats of budget, right?
I'm not sure if I understand your question, but in the budget you provide to us, you will need to show that the leverage column is greater than the amount you're requesting. So you will have to give us some specifics, and you will be held accountable, and we will track those costs through a verification methods that we decide upon. So you will have to show who is leveraging that and how they're leveraging and how you're coming to those amounts.
So in case of one applicant and one budget with one contractor of USAID,
Yep.
In order to prove that for-profit company also co-fund this project, we need to have some kind of memorandum of understanding between non-profit and for-profit, or contribution agreement to prove this co-funding.
Yeah, and so what I would suggest is you have a sub-budget that shows that partner, what they're bringing and what is being provided. And also, as I mentioned, you could provide as an option, in this case it might make sense, some sort of agreement or memorandum of understanding that shows what is that partnership already exists. Yep.
Yeah. And the last question, when you mention vehicles are not allowed, does it also include, for example, small milk trucks which are needed for development new roads or new cooperatives in the frame of our project, or not?
Yeah, let me, if you don't mind, ask that question through the email, because I think that's a good question for us to be able to explain what we mean by vehicles and versus trucks for moving product, or in this case milk, and tractors. It gets into tractors and equipment, tillers, and so if you don't mind, ask that question online so that we can explain that better to all of you, because that is an area where we get some confusion around.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
I will.
Yeah.
One more clarification about the size of the applicant. So let's say we are the agricultural producer who is working on the land more than 3,000 hectares
Yeah.
of land. But still we have some business idea of developing some new branch, which will be some service provision to the small and medium-sized enterprises. For sure, that small SMEs will meet the criteria, but also we will, as a company, will also benefit from the project, because we will develop new business branch, and we can also use the services developed under the project. So still, in this case, we are eligible to apply if we address as the core SMEs, but still we benefit by ourselves being a bit larger than the criteria.
Yeah. So again, keep in mind there's eligibility, and then there's who we're focusing the impact on. Yes, you are eligible to apply as a larger company, multinational, well beyond those SME requirements, and we encourage that. And we understand that you will benefit through getting this support and how you use these funds, and we ask that you tell us how you'll benefit. That's great to know. At the same time, you do need to also, in this scenario, show how you're going to impact those select SMEs and what are going to be the impacts on helping them. And that's a perfect example of the type of partnership we look to have.
Matthew, is it mandatory that all three partners show their contribution either in kind or in cash? Or it could be just the lead applicant showing contribution and the others just have helping with the
Well, broader than that, no, not all have to show leverage, and nor does the lead have to show leverage, but somebody on the partnership has to show leverage. So it could be a scenario where, especially if it's a nonprofit lead organization, they may not have the ability to show a significant amount of leverage, or they show a much smaller amount than the amount that they're receiving. But the overall partnership, they would have a private sector partner that would show a significant amount. And ultimately, we need to get to that one-to-one, meaning how much you're requesting versus how much the overall consortium is putting in. Yeah.
In branding, you want to talk about branding? Is that, are they qualified or required to follow branding guidelines?
Yeah, so in the agreement that will eventually be signed with the shortlist and the awardees, there is a branding and marking plan. Again, that is something we will work with you on designing depending on the specific project. There will be some requirements around branding and marking, and each is different because it gets a little bit sticky as to if the company is putting in its own funding to build something versus what USAID's funding is being used for. So we will have to tailor that specifically to the project itself. Yeah.
Non-profits incomes are grants. So we expect a big grant from big donor, and which perfectly fits to this partnership.
Yep.
Should we mention this as our cash contribution or other donor contribution?
Yeah, so you can use, you can demonstrate leverage that comes from an alternate donor. And I haven't mentioned this earlier, it cannot come from a U.S. government donor. So you can't double dip, ask for money from one side and then show leverage from the State Department or from another office with USDA or so forth. But yes, you can show leverage as alternate donor resources. Again, priority is on cash investment, in kind is second, and third is that alternate donor. So we do look at and weigh out preferences towards where those investments are coming from. But you can use alternate donor resources, assuming it fits within the project you're proposing. It can be used as leverage.
So this funds goes not to cash category, but other donors funds.
Right,
Grant
yeah,
from
right,
EID, for example,
right.
goes to other donors.
Yeah.
Actually, two questions. One is very simple. One organization can apply only once or can submit two or more applications. And the second question about activities within the projects. Should we concentrate our activities only to be done within Ukraine, or we can invite experts from abroad,
Yeah,
bring
okay.
people to study some technologies in neighbor countries as well.
Right. So one organization can apply as many times as they would like, so we could have numerous applications from any one. That's okay. As far as the use of the funds, keep in mind that obviously the target of this is to focus the funding, the capacity building, the knowledge transfer, the activities and interventions, again, at Ukrainian SMEs. So do not send an application that also focuses work in Moldova or Belarus or a neighboring country. Now, if you're focusing that technology requires bringing in outside expertise, that's fine. We can fund consultants from U.S. As well as anywhere else in the world based on the skill set. So you can utilize funds to pay for those type of support. Obviously, assuming the person's coming here or delivering a product that is going to benefit the end user here in Ukraine.
I assume that the currency of the budget would be in US dollars.
Yes.
So considering the Ukrainian exchange rate reality, the actual spending would be in Ukrainian hryvnia for the partner, right? And for example, if in 1 year US dollar would be, for example, 50 hryvnia, or I don't know, everything is possible nowadays. So it means that budget would not be aligned anymore, and you need to spend more hryvnia to show your budgeted cost, right?
Yeah. So at the point in time of submitting the budget, you should use a market rate. At the current foreign exchange market rate. And I do know what you're saying, that due to depreciation and appreciation and foreign exchange moving around, it can cause challenges to what the expectations were. Again, we'll have to sort of deal with that as we get into operationalization of the project. And yes, there could be an opportunity to adjust budgets. We most likely will not be able to give you more total amount, but within specific line items or certain expectations could be modified based on that scenario. So we'll work with you along the way to adjust if that is a situation that occurs.
Take a break. Just take a break for the ambassador.
Yeah.
The ambassador. Go ahead.
No, keep going.
Just one quick question, because it goes right back to this. Your budget, the budget of the definition of small, medium enterprise is based on $1 million and 3,000 hectares. But is that $1 million at exchange rate of 12 hryvnias, 25 hryvnias? Because that could be a company that's 12 million hryvnias, or now a company that's 25 million hryvnias. So you have a huge range, because for example, we have one SME partner that has 5 hectares, but they are an agribusiness, but at the same time too, that just either qualified them, or they weren't qualified before, could be now qualified. So what exchange rate should we use based on the qualifications of $1 million of an SME?
At the time of submission, right?
Yeah, I would say it's at this point in time that we're.
So as of March 18th, or as of today, that would be your rate that we're looking at.
Right,
so
right. I would use that as your.
It could be 25 million hryvnias or 35 million hryvnias,
depending on
the exchange rate once we turn the project.
Right, correct.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I want to note is SMEs, again, as defined, there are various targeting and focus around SMEs, not only farm producers, but in the scenario where your project is really targeting ultimately that farm producer, you need to demonstrate that that is a producer that is less than the 3,000 hectares. If your project is focusing on building input suppliers, then you need to demonstrate that the input suppliers, or SMEs as well, are less than $1 million in revenue. So in that case, those businesses that you're focusing on may not be holding land. So you mentioned less than 1 million and 3,000. No, it's or 3,000 in that scenario. So keep in mind there is some opportunity to focus and define SMEs per your project specifically. It is encouraged, however, if your project is to focus almost exclusively on small and medium businesses, enterprises that are less than that million, that you also explain to us how that's going to impact the farm level. So please do also show that by building capacity of an input dealer, they will go on to sell XYZ additional metric tons of ag inputs to XYZ number of farm producers. Yeah. Thank you.
What your question was, you said producer, less than 3,000 hectares.
Yeah.
Put in a project, you start a project, 2 years from there, USAID backs out. The reality is, the project could be a 25-year project per se, trees or vines. The reality is, it's a model which you should be able to, ideally you want to be able to do this 100 times, 1,000 times, all over the country. would that be evaluated? That's my idea, is to be able to expand the thing out.
Yep.
Feed everyone.
Well, yeah, clearly, this is, you
Just a
can,
prototype.
right, I mean, this, well, you might say this is seed money. This is
Right.
money
It's
to incentivize you, to partner with you, to make an investment now. And yes, that investment is targeted at a 2-year period, and it is a grant investment. It's not an equity or a loan. And yes, that you need to show us that there is going to be growth. We don't want to see applications that just come to an end in 2 years. That's not the point. The point is to show us that sustainability, that commercial viability, and what that means down the road.
Say we started with 3,000 hectares, what you said. That's our first one. 2 years from now, after that first project gets going, we start another 3,000 hectare ranch. Another one 2 years later. So the model keeps going, regenerating itself. Would that still be considered under the 3,000? It just is multiple. Ideally, everyone is having the opportunity to get into the game.
Well, so the 3,000 is looked at during the evaluation period in April.
Correct.
So we're only looking at, so there's a possibility that you would start with a farmer who has less than 3,000, but by the end of the project they have 5,000. That's okay. Or you have, right, that's fine. And you should tell us what your vision is in that, yes. Okay. Again, if you have additional questions, we are open to receive those through February 19th. Yeah, let me double check that.
February 19th is the last day to submit questions.
Yeah.
Email address, and then everything will be
February 19th, yeah. So please do continue to send in questions.
Do you want to take 1 or 2 questions that were submitted by our online participants?
Since we have the ambassador here, if you don't mind, let's move forward into that. But please tell online if, well, I assume they're hearing me, to please submit those questions, and we will respond shortly. Next week, we'll be responding to questions we received this week. So, thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt. Okay, thank you, Matt. Thank you all for your questions. Sounds like there's a lot of interest. Sorry we didn't get to the online questions, but as Matt said, they'll submit all the responses next week to all the questions here and online. So without further ado, I want to welcome our ambassador, Jeffrey Pyatt, to say a few closing remarks. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Today's my agriculture day. I spent the morning down at the Fairmont with the agriculture minister and the head of the EBRD office here, talking about agriculture opportunities. So this is a sort of natural bookend. My big message is just to underline the strong support of the U.S. government, including the aid mission here, for what we are trying to do to support the efforts that the government itself is making to clean up the agriculture sector and leverage that. Speaking personally, I'm enormously encouraged by the fact that the new government has, as the agriculture minister, somebody who comes from Samopomich, a party committed to the idea of changing the way the Ukrainian government works, cleaning up corruption, and avoiding the peril of business as usual. I am, enormously optimistic, hopeful about the potential for agriculture here. In part because Ukraine has such a fabulous resource endowment. Those resources have been underutilized through most of independent Ukraine's history for reasons that you all know better than me. Inefficient regulation, non-transparent government processes, pervasive corruption. Under the Yanukovych government, I would regularly get approached by American companies who were having difficulties, for instance, with getting their VAT refunds processed, and were being asked for cash payments to facilitate that. So it's not a real secret how things have gotten to where they are today. There are encouraging positive steps already. The Ag Ministry's decision to remove the requirement for licensing and permits for internal transfers of grain is a good positive step. There are many other steps that could be taken which would have the effect of removing regulatory burdens that frankly have persisted not to protect public health or economic efficiency, but because somebody makes money off of it. So I think the good news is you have a minister who understands this, and you have a partner in the United States government who is looking to accelerate and catalyze these changes. Clearly, we already have a large American business presence in the ag and agro-industry sector in Ukraine. I would like to see it get bigger. The companies would like to see it get bigger. But the essential prerequisite is progress on these issues of regulatory transparency, corruption, rule of law, reliability, predictability. The good news as I talk to American ag companies is that they see opportunities in Ukraine which are larger than many other places in the world, in part because you have 2 decades of bad policy, which means that the land itself is underutilized, underinvested, so there's a lot of headroom. And then another critically important piece is the association agreement with Europe, which opens up the largest consumer market in the world in terms of purchasing power for food products, agro products coming out of Ukraine, going into the European economic space on a duty-free basis. This project is attractive because it has the prospect of helping to bring in small and medium enterprises, so we're not just talking about the Cargills and ADMs of the world, and certainly will enjoy my strong support as we go forward. I think I can also tell you, again, I've been very impressed by the new agriculture minister and have had very easy access to him. We've also announced last week the formation of a working group involving the American Chamber of Commerce, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the U.S. Department of Commerce to bring together American companies and the Ukrainian government to basically identify bottlenecks and move those out of the way. So nobody imagines that these problems are going to be removed from one day to the next. They are habits and impediments that have grown up over many, many years, but clearly progress has begun. And the good news is, because it's agriculture, you're not talking about a multi-year return on investment. You get the right policies in place, you attract the right investment resources, and essentially in one season you can begin to show positive results. So I see this as a priority area for our policy engagement with the government. I know that the Prime Minister, President Poroshenko, also share this priority, and I look forward to seeing how this project unfolds. So thanks to Jed and the USAID team, and I'm glad to be able to spend a little bit of time with you. So thanks.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. There's more coffee and cookies and things if you want to have some before you go, but we look forward to seeing your proposals and any further questions that you have in the next week. So, all right, thank you.